You're listening to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. On this program, we feature interviews with distinguished members of the musical and performing arts community across multiple genres, from classical to contemporary, sacred to secular. We explore the most important issues affecting the arts today. Music Matters brings diverse innovators, ideas, and audiences together to create a broader musical community, to inspire new solutions to unprecedented challenges. I'm Jason Tramm, and I'm a classical music professional with over 25 years of experience as a conductor, music director, university professor, and now the host of Music Matters. These conversations with distinguished artists take you behind the curtain to explore artistic innovation under the most extreme conditions. Thank you for joining us today, and check out our website at www.jasontram.net. And that's JasonTramm.net. Again, that's www.jasontram.net. TRAMM.net. Here you can explore our past 150 episodes and find a listing of our upcoming guests and topics. Also, be sure to join us on social media for more Music Matters content. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Acclaimed pianist Donna Weng Friedman enjoys a varied career as a soloist, chamber musician, teacher, curator, and app developer. She is the co-creator and co-host of Her Music, Her Story, a mini-series on WQXR, as well as a concert series that shines a light on women composers, both past and present. Donna is also the creator of the Music Bee Club interactive classical music apps for children aged 2 through 8. Featuring world-class musicians and produced by 16-time Grammy Award winner David Frost. As a recitalist, she has appeared at prestigious international venues and has collaborated with many of the finest instrumental artists in the world. She's also performed as a soloist with the Atlanta Symphony, Philadelphia Orchestra, and Shanghai Symphony, to name a few. She currently serves on the piano faculty of the Mannes School of Music. Welcome, Donna Weng Friedman.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight with you, Jason. I love your program.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, whenever I get to meet new artists I haven't collaborated with directly, it's such a thrill. And to someone who's doing such incredible work, I'm delighted to have this conversation tonight.
Oh, thank you. And I think you're doing incredible work too. I've been watching this show throughout the pandemic, and it's one of the highlights. It really is wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's a labor of love and something we came up with. Basically, I was supposed to be making my conducting debut in Vienna and Prague, and I was so excited. I spent years setting up those collaborations. And then all of a sudden, it was all gone for all of us. All of our performances kind of stopped suddenly. And I said, well, I miss my colleagues. For the first month I told you I live in the suburbs, I spent gardening and working in the backyard, getting all the leaves cleaned up and cleaning up all the trees. And finally, about a month later that was done, I said, now I've got to do something creative. So jump back to the creative track, and I said, I miss having the conversations with my colleagues, and the show came out of that. So it's been a real blessing to get to speak to people like you about the great work they're doing.
Yeah. Another silver lining of the pandemic, right?
Time with our families has been one blessing, and then finding new ways to be creative.
Right. And connect with new people. The world became smaller with the virtual world, the virtual programming. Of course, we all want and can't wait for in-person concerts to come back. That's a given. But I think the virtual programming is here to stay as well. I think that's one of the silver linings that many people who may not have had time or the inclination or or could afford classical music concerts. I think over the pandemic, with just a click of the mouse, they were introduced to a whole new world, and I'm hoping that they will come to our concerts.
Well, I think that we've reached people who've never been reached before, and that our job is going to be to make that translate to live performance.
That's right. Exactly.
So you were in the center of the pandemic, being in New York City. How did that affect you? I know everyone on the show, I've spoken about this. What's it like during COVID? And every single 150 people have had different reactions and processed it in a different way. Some have not performed and not done a lot of performance and have done a lot of reading and introspection. I say that we've all become philosophers during COVID. How did you handle that?
It was one of the most interesting years, actually, and also one of the most productive and busy years. And it all stemmed from one incident in Central Park when I was walking my dog last March, when I was assaulted, for being Asian.
Oh my God,
Um,
I had no idea.
yeah, well, I wasn't physically hurt. It was a verbal assault. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, walking my dog, and this very large man comes, barreling towards me, and he starts screaming in my face every single, nasty racial ethnic slur about Asians that he could think of. And then he ended it by saying, well, get out of this country, go back to where you came from, or get what you deserve.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And, there was a group of passers-by, and they didn't hear this. I don't know if they did or not, but they were walking towards us. So right at the moment when I thought he was going to maybe, you know, hit me or something, they came and he ran into the park. And so I took my dog and I ran home. And this was in March, 2 weeks before sheltering in place started, right? But from that day on, I did not leave my apartment for 6 months.
Oh wow.
You know,
And as you said, like, the words can be just as vicious as being assaulted physically. The words, that's just, and for someone who was born in New York City, and we were just talking about you were born in Queens, and my parents were born in Queens, and I was born in New York. I mean, it's unreal. People treat people that way.
I have to say that I've led a very smooth sailing life. Been very lucky. I've never felt discriminated against before. So this came as such a shock. And it shook me up. But, I think what was worse was over the next couple of weeks reading about so many hate crimes against the AAPI community. It, it was just unbearable after a while.
I saw a lot of my colleagues. I'm an orchestra conductor, so I've worked with so many people of the Asian community. Of course, we don't even think about that as musicians. We just collaborate with everyone. We collaborate with each other in so many different ways.
Music is colorblind.
Oh, when you get up there and do the job well, that's like, it doesn't matter if you're purple or green or blue,
Right.
or it really doesn't matter. And I always find such great conversations with my colleagues, and I'm listening to these colleagues who I respect so much tell me some of their stories, and it's just hurts me and it just makes me so sad.
Yeah. And, during this period of time, I actually stopped, my morning ritual was to have my coffee and read the paper. And then I just stopped doing that. I couldn't do it anymore because it was so painful. All the bad news, everything that was going on. So I changed my routine to listening to music. But I started listening specifically to music written by underrepresented composers. So women composers, Asian American composers, African American composers. And there is a wealth of music out there. I mean, really, it's a treasure trove. And so many people have not had the opportunity, to hear it. So this was really an interesting and a time of growth for me, because even though I felt, that this incident was horrific towards me, and I, was shaken up by all of that. I also saw that as an opportunity for me to do something about it, and that's when I created Heritage and Harmony in collaboration with WQXR, because I felt like, I wanted to have my colleagues, my Asian American, musician, composer colleagues, share their stories and their music. I think stories, our stories are so important to share. The more people know about each other, the more they realize we're not so different, and the more they respect and can feel, empathy and kindness. So WQXR, the studios were closed by then already. So they asked me to do a virtual video series. And that's what I did. And so that was my first project that, came about because of the pandemic because of the incident and all the ongoing hate crimes against, Asian Americans. And that launched last May. And I, felt very good about that. I invited a lot of my, close colleagues, but from all over the country because we were doing it virtually. So that was a wonderful experience to do that.
Well, it's great to see that we talk about the silver lining. We've had a whole year of silver lining. And being musicians, we have to be positive. I mean, we have to have a positive outlook. We've all become these philosophers. And thank you for sharing that, because out of that horrific experience, this is something beautiful that's budding out of it.
Well, I was very happy with that. And, after that, the entire year I've been very productive and doing a lot of virtual concerts and programs. But I have to say, Jason, my year started off with a bang and ended with a bang, because in December, my entire family got sick with COVID.
Oh.
How do you like that? But the good news is that we all, got through it, and it was something that I think, these experiences made me feel very grateful, very grateful for, my life up until all of this happened. And also the fact that we did get through it. And when you get through things like this together as a family and with your friends and your colleagues, you become stronger, and that's how I feel. I do believe that, this past year was a learning experience and also helped me become more connected with my own Asian American identity, with my own heritage, because I felt so much more. I was really, really, really devastated, and I still am, by all these ongoing assaults against the Asian American community. And as you said, I can feel it, the hurt, the anger. A year later, nothing has changed. In fact, I just read that the hate crimes against Asian Americans in this country went up by 167%.
That's staggering and pathetic, really.
Yeah. It's disgusting. And what I've been reading about, the hate crimes have been targeting the most vulnerable of our community, the elderly, women, people who can't fight back, right?
I saw that horrific video. That was all over the news for a while. I mean, someone just like slamming an elderly lady walking to church. I mean, it just makes no sense. I don't know why people are demonizing people like that. It makes no sense at any level.
That's right. But, I think there is hope, because I think that historically, this is not new, obviously, bigotry against Asian Americans has been going on since the 19th century. But what I think is a little bit different, and I do feel that there is hope, is that I think the younger generation of Asian Americans is much more vocal, and also with the help of social media. Social media has made it much easier to communicate and to make a stand and for people to come together. So I see that with the AAPI community, and I'm very proud to be part of that. So these are all the silver linings, and the music, that has been my saving grace throughout this entire year.
How can music help to start healing? How can music be a part of the healing process?
That's such a great question, and there's so many different levels. So let me answer first personally, all right? Because during this past year, when I was listening to all this music, I would actually feel very connected. I listened to a lot of music, but there were 4 pieces specifically that spoke to me that I cannot even describe. And I believe that right before the show, you aired a performance of mine of Prelude by Beata Moon.
Stunning piece.
Right? Stunning piece. That piece, when I first heard it, I felt a connection to it in such a different way than I've ever felt before. It spoke to me, I think, as not just an Asian American woman, but almost it brought back to me almost like a childhood memory. There was an innocence about it, and there was a sense of peace and contentment towards the end. So I looked up the composer, And when I found out it was Beata Moon, it was pretty amazing because we went to Juilliard together. We studied with Adele Marcus.
Oh, it's a small world.
It's a small world. So I reached out to Beata to find out her story because the last I heard, she was a pianist at Juilliard, right? So she told me that, she grew up in a very traditional Korean American family in Indiana, where there are really not a lot of Asians there. So she kind of felt invisible. She was a very good Korean daughter. She studied hard. She played the piano, practiced, got into Juilliard. But it wasn't until years later, when she was an adult, and she actually took time off from piano and music. That's when she found her true calling, and that was as a composer. And this prelude was her very first piece written for piano solo.
Wow.
That's how she found her voice. And I felt it. When I heard it, there was some connection there. So that piece, means a lot to me. And that is one of the pieces on Heritage and Harmony, Silver Linings, my album.
Music's all about storytelling. It's such an important part of music. And the more you know about the people who create that music, the more deeply your interpretations become.
Exactly.
So why don't we take a look at your story? Tell us your story. Did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
Okay, well, let me just tell you how it all began. I was 6 years old and my pet parakeet died.
Oh.
Green spot. Now, I was 6. I didn't take care of him. My brother, who is 9 years older than me, took care of the green spot. But it was our first pet. So when green spot died, I was devastated and I couldn't stop crying. And my mom, who is very superstitious, she said, "Oh, you have to stop crying. It's bad luck." Right? And I couldn't stop crying. It was just so devastating to me to lose, a pet. So my parents bought a piano, a little spinet piano. I remember it's Jansen. Now it's funny because I'm not sure if it's related, but they don't make pianos anymore, but there is a Jansen swimsuit company. So,
They got out of the piano business.
Yeah. Anyway, they bought this piano and my brother started taking lessons. He's much older than me. And he didn't take to it. He didn't take to it that well. It wasn't his thing. So they started me on lessons and I loved it. I stopped crying and I just got into the playing the piano. And it was my first teacher, Mrs. Beck, who is a neighborhood teacher who came to the house. And she taught me my first real repertoire for piano. And that piece was First Lost by Robert Schumann. Mm. And it's from the album of the Young. And when I played that piece and when I performed it in a student recital, I felt my loss from my pet in a way that I couldn't even describe. And I communicated that in my performance through my music. Now, Jason, I was a very shy little girl growing up. I didn't speak much, very quiet, but I found a new way to communicate through music. A year later, I was at the Juilliard Pre-College, and I studied at Juilliard Pre-College for 10 years. And I had the most incredible experience of my life, studying with wonderful teachers and meeting all these incredible, young, talented kids. We all, had so much in common. So I really found joy in performance. I felt more comfortable on stage than anywhere else. I really did. So I started doing competitions and performing professionally at quite a young age. And then in high school, I was the first winner of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra competition. And I had to do, it was, I performed with Maestro Henry Lewis. And,
sure.
Yeah, and it was an incredible experience. Governor Brendan Byrne invited me to his mansion as part of, to honor me as being because at that point we had already moved to New Jersey. So now I was an honorary New Jersey artist there. But I went to Juilliard for 10 years and I wanted to learn more outside of music. I felt like if I could broaden my horizons and learn more about literature, history, the world, that would also add to my, musicality and understanding and performance. So I think I surprised a lot of people at Juilliard, including my teacher, when I chose to go to Princeton instead of Juilliard. And I went to Princeton, and those were the 4 greatest years because I learned so much, not just from the incredible professors, but from my colleagues. But something interesting happened. I kind of pivoted a little bit, and I was interested in working in artist management when I graduated. I got my first job at International Creative Management. Do you remember ICM back in the day? It was one of the top artist management agencies. But they didn't have room for me in the classical music department, so they put me in the rock and roll department.
That's fascinating.
On the 18th floor, I remember that. And I love rock. I love all music. I love all.
Me too.
And for 7 or 8 months, I was doing, I was the assistant agent. So I was the new kid on the block. So I got to do all the dirty work. I had to do all the writers for all the artists. I had to cover some of the really late shows in CD clubs. But I also got to take all my friends to Studio 54, Limelight, and saw Tina Turner, David Bowie at the Garden. I mean, it was something. But by the end of those 7-8 months, I was starving to play again. And, so I ran back to Juilliard for my master's, studied with Adele Marcus, which was another experience. And we actually did get along very, very well after our initial face-off.
You're listening to Music Matters with Jason Tramm on WMCA.
Incredible. What a journey. What has this COVID period taught you about yourself?
Well, I do think that I'm more resilient than I gave myself credit for. I know that I'm an optimist because
You're a true New Yorker.
Yeah, I am a New Yorker. I am, and I always will be a New Yorker. And I look forward to the day that New York is back on its feet and the arts are flourishing again, And I also realize how grateful I am to have my family, my friends, my colleagues, and my music. And, to share my music, even though, this has been such a tough year, to be able to share it virtually and through this album has meant so much to me. But then the other part of it was I also learned that it's so much better doing things together with other people, So the album was, a labor of love, but in the end, the reason why it became Silver Linings was because of all the ongoing, continued hate crimes against the Asian American community. And I wanted to shine a light on the fact that, first of all, this should not continue. And also that every little bit counts. Whatever we can do together to make our lives and the world a better place, we should do it. So all the proceeds for this album will go to this wonderful organization, the Korean American Community Foundation. I'm not Korean, I'm Chinese. This is an organization that started off very small years and years ago to, support the Korean community, but they've grown so much, and the work they do to support not even just the Asian American community, but all communities. And through the year, I've attended their webinars online, of course, and they have done so much incredible education work, because I do think the bottom line is education. We all need to learn to work together and live together.
When people learn and they meet people of other cultures, we realize that the conversation becomes so much more rich when we hear more voices. I mean, that's what makes music so special, is the more voices that come and speak and the more voices that we learn from. This disappears with education.
Exactly. So So that's basically the whole journey of this album, from the music to the collaborations, and then finally to, to having this partnership with this incredible, philanthropic organization. They raise money, and they it goes directly to small businesses that are not doing well during the pandemic. It's pretty extraordinary. So I know, as a musician, I can't do that much, but I think partnering with other people and organizations.
Well, you're doing incredible work, and it's such important work. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Music Matters with Jason Tramm is produced by Mid-Atlantic Artistic Productions, with Jason Tramm as the host and executive producer, and Quentin Tramm as the producer and technical director. Music Matters has quickly become the fastest-growing musical culture podcast on YouTube, recently surpassing over 30,000 episode views, and is pleased to join the roster of radio shows on WMCA, New York City. We hope that you can join us next week. Until then, keep music alive.